Hello, Duncan. Hello again.
Good morning. Looking forward to session two, talking about manufacturing and the role of the digital world and how it all fits together.
Yes, sounds good. Let's do it. Last time we talked about different topic. I will summarize them. Today I want to focus a little bit more on the actual tools that we can use to implement OPEX and the way we can implement OPEX properly. So before this, indeed, a quick recap. So we talked about your unique experience, spending 27 years in the same chemical manufacturing company, from frontline operator all the way to plant manager with diverse roles in between, 3 to 5 years for most roles. Multiple countries as well where you have being operated in, and we spend a bit of time as well having a feel for what your vision of OPEX is. OPEX being operational excellence, of course, for the listeners in case. You mentioned a few things. For example, that back then your company had a pretty strong will, from what I can remember, to implement OPEX, making, for instance, cultural differences between different countries maybe not as relevant as we could have thought. You mentioned also something very important in your opinion, which was the culture being one of the critical factors to be able to implement OPEX properly. And using this aspect of culture versus tools, that's why I want to start the discussion today. So if we assume that culture is actually very important, matters a lot, then we can wonder if the tools that are used for OPEX are actually relevant, or if we can do OPEX using any kind of tools. Are humans and processes more important, and so on. So let's jump in. And the first question I'd have for you, very simple one. Do you think that it's possible to do OPEX using just pen and paper, like the physical word?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the systems that I've seen or grew up with always starts with a pen and paper. And that's how you start to build it. We used to have strips that we'd print off, and then people would write them, put them on a whiteboard, and it's hugely empowering to actually go to a board and write it down. And it's probably one of the bits that I really struggled with when we first started to go towards a digital world was, will we lose that interaction with the paper? Because it's really important that somebody goes and takes the time to write something down, thinks about what they're doing, and then they follow that process that's written on that piece of paper. And it's always a really, I was very unsure. I've always, initially, when I started rolling out, was trying to do partial digital with a certain amount of whiteboards or paper on the wall to try and get that balance. But today, and this day and age, with the digital sort of suite that you can actually look at, I think that's becoming less relevant, especially as the new people coming through the businesses are so used to using their phones, so used to using computers. That digital world is where a lot of people live in these days, and therefore the pen and paper, although I thought it was so important, is less so these days.
So, did you actually then lose any kind of value going from pen and paper to digital, or did you think that no, you managed to compensate because of what you just said, the fact that people are used to it, the fact that they can still get engaged using mobile devices and so on?
No, I don't think we did lose it. Once I'd got over that fear of the loss, I think that so many jobs these days are directly in the digital world, especially from an office-based people, that definitely it was very easy. The other one that I is less much harder is the shop floor. So as an operator, you're working on the line. The way that you make money is you want to optimize the amount of time that the operator is working on the line, therefore to minimize those interruptions to go and update things on boards, to go and be part of those meetings. You want them quick, punchy, and really efficient with what you're doing. So I do still think that what the digital side of this has created is more to do with efficiency rather than to do with losing that interaction. So you still get the interaction, but just in a very different way. And it took me a while, probably a few years, to really come across or actually embed that into the way I sort of saw the way forward.
And what about older generations? Maybe some operators were a bit older, and in their personal life, maybe they were not like super big users of digital tools. Did you have maybe unexpected challenges with this kind of audience, or did it go smoothly?
No, so I have to say that it takes what the key thing here is the training, the elements. You've got to cater for very different people. So if you're in an office, you're generally working with computers day in, day out. So the training for that sort of demographic of people is very different to what you're doing on the front line. Actually talk them through, support them, actually one-to-one or small groups, actually learning how the platform works. Most people pick it up pretty quickly. If I go back, I think it's about 20 years, probably a little bit longer than that. I still remember when we put our first ERP system on the shop floor, and I had a person that hadn't had actually used a computer, and I said, right, so what you need to do is take the mouse and you have to move it and click on there. He physically picked the mouse up and tapped on the screen. Now, I think, I'm going back 20 years or so forth. I think the generations that are now working in manufacturing these days are so used to using computers. You can't do your banking these days without
Yeah.
being able to have the app or things like that. So I do think that the generations coming through, I think they are more than comfortable to be able to use the systems.
Yes, and I was, to be honest, a total prejudice from my side, assuming that older generations were less comfortable with digital tools. It might not be at all the case. Okay, cool. So related to this, do you think that so back then, because of the time it was, the period, and maybe the maturity of existing digital tools, you went, from my understanding, first doing OPEX on pen and papers, physical world, and then moving on to digital. Do you think that there would have been nowadays, it's the case, do you think that there would have been, or if you would implement OPEX nowadays, would you go directly using digital tools, or do you see still any value keeping pen and paper? Do you see actually more value going directly digital? What would be the difference? And digital doesn't have to be like a specific OPEX or connected worker tool. It could be just Power BI, Excel, Power Apps, things like this.
No, and I think it's a really good question because the pen and paper, the interaction, the learning from that is I thought was the critical path for people. I think that OPEX can just go directly to the digital world these days because of the computer literacy of majority of people working in these environments. I think that there's some great off-the-shelf systems, that people are regularly using, and they're becoming much easier. But I think the real turning point that we will see is going to be more to do with the point where AI comes in to support people with those processes. So, like today, if I wanted to add an action to Teams or something like that, I can just talk to the computer and it will interpret and then be able to sort of help me on that process. And so many people are now using AI to understand what to do in everyday tasks at home. How do I do this? You watch a YouTube video. The digital world is now being, brought so much more to the wider population. I think that I think you can go directly to digital.
Okay, okay. And here, jumping on what you say about AI and maybe existing tools that are dedicated to OPEX, I'll want to ask a question about AI versus those specific tools. But before this, do you see in the typical semantics that we see on the market, like a difference between OPEX platforms, or maybe in the context of lean, any kind of lean optimization platform or something like this versus connected worker tool? Like, do you think it's just like a semantic distinction and all the tools are similar, or do you see an actual like functional slash business difference between those different tools?
Well, from my experience, I don't have a huge amount of experience from lean platforms. Everything that I've done in my career with my previous company was homegrown. So we built everything in house.
Wow.
So I I've not got a huge experience of lean tools outside of what we offer as the new company, as Solvace. So the connected worker side of thing, when I came to Solvace, it's probably one of the things that excited me the most was that ability to connect all of those different elements into one place. So you have one location to go to for your OPEX. So whether it be quality, safety, whether it be your Kaizen events, everything was connected back to the platform that you're using. You didn't need to use the platform for everything because we can talk to other things like the maintenance system, CRM, and stuff like that. But what it enabled you to do was create a central location that you can sort of collate and create a picture of what you want to do. No two factories or no two companies are going to want to look at the same thing. And not even two lines within a factory might have different KPIs. They might have different ways of looking at it. So the OPEX might change depending on that.
But if it's so specific, like every line is different, every factory is different, and so on, then are there any actual benefits of buying like existing tools, OPEX platform, connected worker tools, things like this, or using Excel, Power BI, Power Apps, plus nowadays AI, which then can be a big factor helping you building in-house your OPEX implementation platform? Do you think there is any value in still buying those kind of tools? I know it's a tricky one.
No, it's really because previously I tried to do everything through Power BI, and all of the tiered meeting dashboards and so forth were built into Power BI. But then the problem I had then was then connecting to actions, which I was using Microsoft Teams for, and then linking those to the KPIs. It was very hard to create the interactions and the connections between conversations, actions, root cause analysis directly to the KPIs. And I think that's really the bit that I think is the massive benefit, is trying to create that visibility and connection between each of those different elements, especially from a tiered meeting point of view. Because if you've got a KPI, what did the team do about it? Do they need any help? And is there anything more that we're going to do? And then the next step is, has this happened before? And I really do think this is really where the AI element is going to change, because the amount of times in business where you come across, you get to a root cause, you fix that root cause, and again it pops up 6 months later. So you really haven't fixed it. I think that AI will really be able to help us understand those points so that you don't have them happen again.
Yeah, yeah, and I think on your first point, I think a lot of Solvace clients would resonate with this, with the fact that sure, you can try to build everything first on Excel, Power BI, and so on, but you're always gonna miss this like execution layers, putting your action, connecting your RCAs to it, and so forth. So I would I think not be the only one to agree with you, and I also agree with the fact that AI adding this layer of intelligence on top of it can definitely bring some value by bringing some past information, some maybe some insight into what could have happened, things like this. I would agree as well. The idea is to not do AI just to do AI, but to do AI to simplify and optimize, speed up a bit those different processes. So
One of the other
okay,
elements,
let's.
sorry,
Sorry, go
just on
ahead.
the other, there's another element on that. Like for example, checklists, one of the elements that we have, trying to build that in so that you can actually do the checklist, have the root cause analysis if something goes wrong, have the actions associated. And very much a lot of manufacturing lines that I've worked on in my time, those processes that you do day in, day out, those checks you do, the changeovers, those elements almost get captured in an Excel, or they get captured in a Power BI or something like that, to be able to connect again the actions, the root cause analysis, those elements for quality, for safety, for changeover, all into one application, and creating that connectivity. You can really start to see where they move the dial on affecting your OEE or affecting your overall performance and cost. And that's where you can start to see the benefits coming in.
Yeah, and here actually very good, very good transition, because I think from now the benefit of having like a platform like Solvace connecting all the different pillars, let's call them like this, of OPEX is clear. But what about, for instance, exactly what you just mentioned, OEE? Do you think that manufacturing companies need first to implement MES or OEE software before being able to use efficiently an OPEX platform, or is it not always necessary? What's your take on it?
No, you don't. You don't have to have an OE system in place before you could take on, for example, the connected worker, because what you're doing with the connected worker is you're going to get improvements across talking about the same thing every day: safety, quality, people, delivery, and cost. For example, what are those key KPIs? You don't need to have the OE number to be able to talk about those things. You've got to have a set of questions you talk about every single day and make sure that everybody, whether you're a frontline worker to the plant manager to the overall regional OPEX person, you just need to make sure that everybody is aligned. And I think that's really what happens with this. Now, if you really want to make improvements, OEE, so your downtimes, your quality rejects and reworks, or the performance of the line, the tack time, and so forth, that will improve if you do have a proper OEE system and you can measure that, and that information goes directly into the system to say how you're performing, because that really will then give you feedback with whether the way that you're operating, that process that you're following is actually working and giving you results.
So would it be fair to say that not necessary, but definitely having both tools will not be like a 1 + 1 = 2, maybe a 1 + 1 = 3, like being able to really multiply the value you extract out of those two parallel software?
Very much so. So what the OEE will give you is will give you the down to the detail of exactly what you want to tackle. What the connected worker does is connect where that KPI is, the actions you took, and then the change point. And this is probably one of the hardest things to keep on top of is when you implement a change, you also want to make sure that you capture that change and then see the benefit in the months to come or the weeks or the hours, whichever it is. But you want to be able to capture that and then link those things back. And I think that's a really important step. And also, what happens with the connected worker is you're able to do management of change. So you want people to have the freedom to make change and make improvements across the shop floor, but you want to do it in a structured way. You don't want to affect your quality, and actually your quality goes down. Therefore, you might get more rejects, even though you're running faster. So you want to make sure that the quality team signs on it. So this is where, and if there's a safety point, you always do a risk assessment, revalue the risk assessment. And those are the elements that really come together with connected workers, being able to factor in, we want to change this, make sure we change it in the right way with the right settings, the right way of actually making the change. The change happens, and then you can monitor that change using one of the KPIs. And it's all there in one platform for you to see. And it really defines investing time and effort into change and how much you get back from making that small effort.
So it can track this very well. But for example, you give like an example with quality or safety. What about industry with very strong frameworks, regulatory frameworks, let's say pharma for quality or something like this? Maybe sometimes the connected worker tool will not be enough in those scenarios. And so what about, let's open a little bit more the question, what about other software like ERP, CMMS, QMS, LMS? Like, what do you think about those tools? Like, are some of them necessary? Is an ERP necessary? Are there benefits into doing integration? Can we have them live separately without integrating them? Like, what's your take on it?
You can, but depending on the size of the industry. So let's take, for example, an ERP system. If you were a small single factory, you could probably run a decent system off an Excel. If you didn't have too many products to run, there wasn't too much complexity behind it. But what happens is as you grow, as you build, what you leverage by putting an ERP system into a business is you can then leverage buying in bulk. So you can see across many different factories how much you're doing. So what you're doing by using these systems is you're making those decisions more visible and you're making them more structured so you can make the right decision with the right information. So it's just making it easier to make that decision. If you're running an Excel sheet and you had 3 plants and you're like, right, so go and work out how much we've used of product material A, you then have to go and do a calculation, build all of that information. That's where the simplicity of having a global system comes in. Other ERP, CMMS, the same thing. If you're doing maintenance on a machine that's in England or one that's in France, they're the same machine. You want to have the same maintenance routines. The CMMS will help you to build those types of routines and make sure that you have your systems operating efficiently and effectively.
And the connected worker tool being this kind of a middle platform that can integrate with all of them, like what value is then extracted when we are able to integrate all those existing application to a connected worker tool, OPEX platform?
Because when you've integrated it in, the one thing that the connected worker helps is it gives you one place where the team can actually interact with, and they will also be able to get actions and also root cause analysis, and all of those elements are all linked into and then connected back to those systems, the CMMS, the ERP. All of that information goes directly into the connected worker, and the connected worker then creates that family, where not family but connections between each of those systems. Again, making sure that one of my pet hates was that I'd have actions everywhere. I'd have actions in my quality team. I'd had to have actions from health and safety audits. I'd have my executive meetings where I have actions coming out of that. What the connected worker does is make sure that all of those systems all have a central location for you to be effective with your time. And if it's all in one place, you can speed up that process. Everybody can see what's going on. Really, it's that visibility piece, because the connection, and when I had people working for me, you could really see when people were overloaded, making sure that they needed help, we can get people in, and you can then set the priority off of that as well, making sure that you're trying to target the right elements for the business to succeed.
Well, so I think it's fair to say that the connected worker tool will not replace all of those software, but that there is definitely some great value into integrating at least some parts of each of these possible software to the connected worker tool.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that time is passing, so maybe let's finish up with some rapid fire questions. So I have 5 questions, and the idea is to try to keep the answer on your side between 20 to 30 seconds. They may not necessarily be related to the topic we talked about today, but in more generic open questions. So first one book or resource that every frontline leader should read?
Oh, very good question. Don't have it to hand. I'll come back to that one.
You
I
play the
always
Joker. You can
have
only
a look,
play it
Craig.
once.
I have. I don't
But
have
you,
that one. You'll have to
but
cut
you,
that one out.
do, do you remember like
I
a
have an
title or
internal one.
something?
I have an internal one for JM. So
All right, no problem. We'll get back to this in case. The most underrated metric that is tracked by manufacturing companies.
rework. It's
Okay.
almost one of the. A lot of companies do rework, but capturing that back into the OEE is not a simple thing. Either the labor, the cost for the materials, and extra. It's a hard one to pull back in.
So they just leave it aside to not.
No, they
Uh,
do it, but it's not clear cut. OEE is
okay.
very clear cut. Performance delivery, performance, downtime, and quality, and then rework bolts onto that as well.
Okay. Biggest myth about manufacturing.
Ooh,
We touched upon older generations earlier. You can go at it.
biggest myth. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know. I'd have to come back to you on that one.
What's one thing a line operator wish their managers would know?
Um, the key thing for an operator is to be heard. I think the most empowering thing for operators is when the management team or the supervisor team go down and listen. Because generally, if you want to look for the root cause, it's generally found down with the operators. And if you work with them, you'll come to much more effective solutions.
And maybe we can ask the reverse question, like what would be one thing that the plant manager would wish that that his employees actually know?
The key thing that I think the key thing is to do with making sure that everybody understands what the main objective and the goal is that you're working towards. And if you can go down and ask them that and they can tell you, that's probably you've won with your culture.
Okay. Best piece of advice that you have received in your previous company over those 27 years, if you could find one.
Probably the best thing is to be effective with your communication. I think if you can support others and be. Su- These are really tough questions, Vincent.
It's the last one.
Um, I'll have to think about that one. Maybe we'll have to do this section again.
Okay, but communication is a good one, so no worries.
Yeah, no, communication is an absolute critical one, but I'll have to think about the way to put it.
Okay. All right, no problem. Okay, then that's it for today for the second part of the podcast with the Solvace team. Duncan, thank you very much again for sharing all your insight about your current and past experiences. That was, I think, very insightful. The audience will like it very much. And on these good words, I wish you a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Vincent. Really enjoyed doing this with you. You've been absolutely brilliant. My pleasure.
Bye bye.